Hello everyone, here is Milan from IP Fabric. Today I prepared slightly different scenario for you because today we are going to be interested in troubleshooting IP Fabric discovery issues. So at first, what we can see here at the left, I prepared 3 snapshots. So let's imagine I install IP Fabric and I would like to discover my network. So let's see what we did for our first snapshot, which unfortunately is completely empty. The duration of the snapshot was just 2 seconds. So let's see what happened. The best source of any information when it comes to troubleshooting snapshots or to know what the IP Fabric was connecting to, attempting to connect, or failed to authenticate is always the connectivity report over here. So let's imagine that we kind of set up our IP Fabric with credentials. We set up our IP Fabric with the rest of the settings, but we failed to discover pretty much anything. So let's see what we have in the connectivity report. And now the reason why the connectivity report is empty is that the best practice for IP Fabric is provide us at least one point for the discovery. We call it a seed. The seed is pretty important for one reason, because if you don't use the seed, you can of course alternatively use the default gateway, or you can test the trace route with IP Fabric as well. But the best to do is really just provide at least one or two seed IP address to let the discovery algorithm to really kick on, connect at least to the first router, discover the R table, discover the neighbors based on the OSPF, BGP, CDP, LDP, or other discovery protocols. The reason why the connectivity report is empty, it means that we didn't try to connect to anything. If we go back and we check the settings in the snapshot, which is over here, what we can see here that the IP filter for the discovery is set up to 10.66.00/16, which is fine. If we have a look at the seed, it's empty. That means we are not telling IP Fabric to store it anywhere, all right? But we can fix it. So what I did in the next snapshot, I included one IP address into the seed. So when we go to the settings for a second snapshot, I just added one single IP address of one of the routers in the scope that I want to discover into the seed. I wouldn't really recommend, putting whole subnet /24 or even /23 into the seeds, for the reason being that if you put the subnet /24, the IP Fabric will be forced to attempt to connect to all the IP addresses in the subnet, which we don't want. We only want a one router, one layer 3 switch, and then let the discovery algorithm kick in and discover the rest of the network just by discovery, all right? So in this discovery, we have authentication, we have seed, and we have our filter. So let's see how we go. If we go for the connectivity report for the second snapshot, where we discovered 13 devices, took us about 1 minute to complete, 1.5 minutes, all right? And we go to the connectivity report. So if we wanna, so again, this table is the information about where the IP Fabric tried to connect, where it didn't connect for some reason, like for example, if we take this IP address. So we discover, based on specific routing, it could be a static route very likely, that there is a potential networking device hiding behind his IP address, but we didn't try to connect because the IP address, if you remember correctly, is not in the include list. So we didn't try, okay? So if we want to take the source, which was before the seed, so it's one address and the other one. I think I then tried to discover a different device. That's why the second device is a seed, but it doesn't matter. Then if we check for the status discovered, so we want to basically filter out all the discovered devices and we filter them by the source. It means that this was our original seed. This one I just did afterwards because I tried to rediscover a specific device. It doesn't really matter. And then from the routing table, from the static routes, very likely we pick up this one, and this one, all these. From the ARP tables, we pick up the other networking devices, which means that we check the ARP table, we verify based on MAC address if there's sitting potentially a networking device behind this MAC address, and then we connect, okay? And then what can happen sometimes, so you discover all your scope, you're completely fine, you're happy with your discovery, and suddenly, bang, you have just 10 devices in your discovery and not 13. So what happened? What I did on one of the routers, or pretty much, let's say, firewall, I disabled SSH and Telnet as well, so we couldn't connect. And I also disabled discovery on some of the other devices. So when we go to the connectivity report, again, we can see why and what happened. As a source, I filtered for previously discovered devices. So all these devices were previously discovered, and 4 of these were not discovered. And again, it's just an IP address, so it's not a device, because if you remember correctly, we discovered 10 and we were supposed to discover 13. So which means that we try to connect to the device, but we use other IP address to connect to it, very likely. And with all these other, we had authentication problem. And this one, it had a connection problem. So again, the more than 95% of the reasons, or the most of the reasons why IP Fabric cannot discover a device is the first, the connection error. The connection error indicates there's an access list, or we are not allowed to connect with SSH or Telnet. The second most common error is the authentication error. And you can pretty much tip what does this error mean. It means that we could connect. We had the prompt for the username and password, but we had it wrong for a specific IP. So that's why we couldn't connect. The connection error, however, indicates that there wasn't even the prompt asking for the username and password. And that's the difference. If you want to know more, you can just click on the errors and do no more. And this is the history of the discovery. So first, we try to SSH, Telnet, SSH, Telnet, because in the CL I set it with the 3 complete attempts to connect. And now, let's imagine that we have 500 devices and suddenly we have 20 less. You can't just go through a table and figure it out on your own. But what you can do, you can see the delta between the snapshots. Where you can see that? Here in the management and the changes. So the first snapshot, we can pretty much ignore that because there's nothing discovered. There's no port numbers, no devices. So we take the second snapshot. We click next. And we grab the second snapshot, which we want this one, where there are 3 devices less. And now we can see what's going on. So we can filter out for edit or removed. We confirm that, and voila. So ultimately we know that these 3 devices are missing in the new snapshot. And if we want to know the reason why, we can just grab an IP address, go to the discovery snapshot, and in the connectivity report, we can figure out why. And the reason being for this one is that I disabled the management protocols on the firewall before the second snapshot started. So I hope this video was informative for you. And if you are having any other issues, please let us know, communicate to your account manager or the system engineer, and happy to help. Goodbye.